My name is Claire Donovan. I am 34 years old. And the morning after my wedding, I woke up to a text from my mother. 7 words. We had to leave early. You understand. I read it twice. Set my phone face down on the nightstand. My husband Daniel was still asleep beside me. The morning light was coming through the curtains the way it does when the world has no idea what happened the night before. I understood perfectly. They had left at 9:47 p.m. I know the exact time because the photographer caught it, my parents slipping through the side exit while my entire board of directors was on the dance floor. My father's hand on my mother's back, both of them moving quickly. The way people move when they have just realized something and need to get out before anyone notices. They noticed. Everyone noticed. But before I tell you what my board saw that night and what my parents had spent 15 years making sure those same people would never know, I need to take you back. To a kitchen in Hartford, Connecticut. To a family that believed success was something you performed for the right audience. And to a daughter they had spent years editing out of the version of themselves they showed the world. If you are watching this right now, drop your city in the comments. Just your city. I read everyone. And if you have ever been the family member someone was embarrassed to claim, like this video. Now, back to Hartford. I grew up in a house where appearances were the primary currency. My parents, Richard and Margaret Donovan, were both educators. My father chaired the English department at a small liberal arts college in Hartford. My mother taught piano to the children of other educators and academics and anyone else whose opinion she considered worth maintaining. They were not wealthy, but they were careful about who knew that. The image they projected was one of quiet intellectual respectability. The right dinner parties, the right book club, the right opinions delivered in the right tone. They were the kind of people who used the word tasteful as both a compliment and a weapon. I was the older of 2 children. My brother Patrick is 3 years younger, easy, agreeable, the kind of son who reflected their image back to them without any of the complications I seemed to generate simply by existing. From the time I was very small, I asked inconvenient questions. Not rudely, just specifically. I wanted to know how things worked, why decisions were made, what the numbers actually said underneath the story being told about them. My father called it a phase. My mother called it exhausting. By high school, I had developed a specific interest in finance. Not because anyone encouraged it, nobody did, but because numbers, unlike people, did not change their behavior based on who was watching. I applied to Wharton without telling my parents. I got in. My mother's first response was, "Is that really the kind of environment you want to be in?" My father said he supposed it was practical. Neither of them asked how I had managed to get a partial scholarship, how I planned to cover the rest, what I intended to do with the degree. Those questions would have required treating my ambitions as something worth understanding. I covered the gap with 3 part-time jobs and a loan I paid off over 7 years. I did not tell them about the loan either. I graduated with honors. Took a position at a mid-sized financial consulting firm in New York. Worked for 6 years, built a client base, developed a specialty in restructuring family-owned businesses that were hemorrhaging money in ways their founders were too proud to acknowledge. I was good at it. Exceptionally good. Because I had grown up inside exactly that kind of household. By 30, I had made partner. By 32, I had my own firm. 7 people, then 14, then 23. A client list that included regional companies, 2 hospital systems, and a portfolio of family businesses across the Northeast that had been referred to me by the same 3 board members who had known my work since my consulting days. My parents did not know the name of my firm. I had stopped telling them things around the time my mother responded to my first promotion with, "I just hope you are not sacrificing the important things for work, Claire." The important things. I had always wondered what she thought those were. I met Daniel at 31. A civil engineer who built bridges, literally, structurally, the kind that carry weight for decades without anyone thinking about them. He was patient in the way of people who understand load-bearing structures. He knew from our 3rd date that I had a complicated relationship with my family. By our 1st year together, he knew most of the shape of it. On our 2nd anniversary, he proposed at a restaurant we had been to on our 1st date. No speech. Just a question. "Will you build something with me?" I said yes before he finished asking. The wedding planning began immediately. We chose a venue in Connecticut, a restored estate outside Hartford, the kind of place with good light and enough space for the 212 people we planned to invite. My parents were on the guest list. Of course they were. So was my board. What I had not told my parents, what I had not told anyone except Daniel and my assistant Maya, was that 3 of the 7 board members of my firm were people who had grown up in Hartford. People who had attended the same circles my parents had spent their lives carefully cultivating. People who knew exactly who Richard and Margaret Donovan were. And people who, over the years of working with me, had heard enough context to understand what my parents had believed about their daughter's future and what that daughter had quietly built instead. I did not plan what happened at the wedding.
I want to be clear about that.
I simply invited everyone who mattered to me. And for the first time in 34 years, all of them were in the same room. The seating chart was alphabetical. I had not rearranged it to manufacture a moment. But moments, I have learned, manufacture themselves when the right conditions are in place. The estate was everything I had hoped it would be on a Saturday in October. Old stone walls. A terrace overlooking the Connecticut River. String lights that Daniel's brother had helped hang 2 days before. The kind of October light that turns everything gold without asking for credit. 212 guests. Round tables with white linens. A small jazz quartet that played through cocktail hour and transitioned into something warmer as the evening settled in. My parents arrived at 6:15. My mother was in navy, appropriate, tasteful, exactly what she would have worn to one of their dinner parties. My father wore a suit he had owned for at least 8 years. I noticed the lapels. I did not say anything. They found their table, table 7, near the center of the room. Excellent placement, the kind of position that communicated they were important without placing them at the head of anything. They did not know who was at table 8. My board members arrived between 6:20 and 6:40. Eleanor Marsh, 63, silver-haired, the kind of woman who had chaired 3 company boards and still answered her own phone. She had been one of my first clients at the consulting firm. She had referred me to the other 2. Thomas Riley, 58, Hartford native, had grown up 2 neighborhoods from my parents. His daughter had taken piano lessons from my mother for 4 years in the early 2000s. And Patricia Chun, 61, the most quietly powerful person I had ever met, who had a memory for detail that made other people feel pleasantly observed and occasionally gently dismantled. They found their table, table 8, adjacent to table 7. Cocktail hour moved the way good cocktail hours move. People circulating, finding each other, the specific warmth of a room full of people who are genuinely happy to be there. Daniel's family filled one side of the room with noise and laughter. My colleagues clustered near the bar and talked about things that had nothing to do with work because that was the agreement we had. My parents were doing what they always did in social situations, performing. My mother had found 2 women from their book club who had been invited as family friends. My father was telling a story I recognized from 30 feet away by the shape of his gestures. Then Eleanor Marsh crossed the room. She had spotted my father. Not because she knew him, she did not personally, but because she had a particular way of moving toward interesting configurations, and the configuration of Richard Donovan telling a story near the edge of the terrace had apparently registered as interesting. She introduced herself. My father straightened slightly. The name Eleanor Marsh meant something in Hartford financial circles. I watched him recalibrate in real time. Claire's firm has been extraordinary, Eleanor said. We have worked together for 6 years. I was telling my husband just last week, the restructuring work she did for the hospital system alone saved them $11 million over 3 years. My mother set down her champagne glass. My father said, "Yes, of course." He said it the way people say things when they are trying to sound like they already knew. Eleanor smiled. She had an exceptional ear for performance. "You must be so proud," she said. 23 people. The client list she has built. Really extraordinary for someone who did it entirely on her own terms. Entirely on her own, my mother said. The words came out careful, measured. She really did, Eleanor said warmly. I remember when she made partner at the consulting firm. I told her then, "You have built something nobody can take from you." And she has. I was across the room when this conversation happened. Maya, my assistant and one of my oldest friends, had been watching. She sent me a text. Your mom's face when Eleanor said, 11 million. I don't have words. I put my phone back in my clutch and walked toward the dance floor. The dinner was everything Daniel had wanted it to be.
Warm.
Unhurried. The kind of meal where the food is good but the real thing being consumed is time. Time with people you chose in a room that smells like candles and autumn and something that is very close to joy. My parents ate quietly at table 7. I checked on them twice. My mother smiled and said everything was lovely. My father asked about the jazz quartet. Neither of them mentioned Eleanor Marsh. At 8:30 the speeches began. Daniel's best man went first. Funny, warm, the kind of speech that makes the bride cry because it reveals a version of her husband she already knew but is moved to have named publicly. Then Maya. Maya had known me for 11 years. She had been with me when I made partner. She had been in the office the night I signed my first board member. She had answered my phone at 11 p.m. when deals were closing and brought me coffee at 7 a.m. when they weren't. She spoke for 6 minutes. She talked about the firm, about what I had built, about the specific kind of person who builds something in silence, not because they are hiding, but because they have learned that the work speaks more clearly than the announcement. She said, Claire never needed anyone to believe in her. She just needed space to prove what was already true. I was looking at Daniel when she said it, but I felt my mother's eyes from table 7. Thomas Riley caught me near the bar after the speeches. He had grown up 2 neighborhoods from my parents. He had known their reputation, the careful intellectualism, the managed image, the way you know the reputation of a house you have driven past many times without stopping. Your parents seem surprised, he said quietly. Yes, I said. Good surprised or difficult surprised? I looked across the room. My father was speaking to Patricia Chen. My mother was very still beside him. I think, I said, they are meeting their daughter for the first time. Thomas raised his glass slightly, said nothing else. Some toasts do not need words. My parents left at 9:47 p.m. I know the exact time because Maya had been watching and sent me a timestamp. I did not see them leave. I was on the dance floor with Daniel, his hand at my waist, the jazz quartet playing something slow and unhurried. The kind of song that makes a room feel like it has always been exactly this size. What I saw was the gap at table 7 when I looked up between songs. 2 empty chairs. 2 folded napkins left with the specific precision of people who wanted their absence to look intentional. I looked at Daniel. They left, I said. He looked at the empty chairs. Then at me. Are you okay? He said. I thought about it honestly. Yes, I said. I actually am. He held me a little tighter. We kept dancing. The text arrived the next morning. We had to leave early. You understand. I read it twice. Set my phone face down. Looked at the morning light coming through the curtains. Then I picked the phone back up and read it one more time. You understand. I had been understanding my entire life. Understanding that my ambitions were impractical. Understanding that my choices were too far from what they had imagined. Understanding that their version of respectability did not have a category for what I was building. I had understood all of it. What I understood now was something different. They had left not because they were tired or unwell, or had somewhere else to be. They had left because the room had become too true. Because Eleanor Marsh had said 11 million and Thomas Riley had grown up 2 neighborhoods away and Patricia Chen remembered everything, and the daughter they had always quietly edited had been, for one full evening, impossible to edit. They had left because staying would have required acknowledging who I was. And that was something they had never quite managed to do. My mother called 3 days later. Her voice had the quality it always had when she was navigating towards something she had already decided. Careful, bright, slightly elevated. It was a beautiful wedding, Claire. We were so glad to be there. You left at 9:47, I said. A pause. Your father was tired. The drive. Mom.
She stopped.
Eleanor Marsh, I said. Thomas Riley. Patricia Chen. Did you know who they were before last night? A longer pause. We knew you worked with some people, she said. You did not know the firm, I said. You did not know the client list. You did not know about the hospital system or the restructuring work or the 23 people who work for me. You did not know because I stopped telling you things around the time you responded to my first promotion by asking if I was sacrificing what mattered. Silence. I built something, I said. I built it entirely. With no safety net, and no inherited connections, and no family who thought it was worth understanding. And last night, everyone who has ever believed in that work was in the same room. For the first time. My mother's voice, when it came back, was smaller. We are proud of you, Claire. I know you are, I said.
Now.
When there are 23 employees and a board and a photographer who caught you leaving at 9:47.
She did not answer that.
I am not angry, I said. I want you to understand that. I am not calling to fight. I am calling to tell you something I should have said a long time ago. Your approval was never the foundation I built on. I built on the work, and the work held. I said goodbye, hung up. My father called the following week. He was more direct than my mother. He had always been more direct when my mother was not in the room to manage the conversation. I spoke to Thomas Riley, he said. I waited. We grew up near each other, he said. I did not realize he knew you. He has been on my board for 4 years, I said. He said. My father stopped. Started again. He said you were one of the most rigorous financial minds he had worked with. He said he had referred you to 3 other board members. He said the work you did for one of his portfolio companies had saved it. Yes, I said. I did not know, my father said. No, I said. You did not ask. The line was quiet for a long time. I should have, he said. It was the most accountable thing my father had ever said to me. For words.
Plain.
Undecorated. The kind of sentence that cost something to say, and my father was not a man who paid easily. Yes, I said. You should have. We talked for 22 minutes after that. He asked about the firm, real questions, specific ones. He asked about Daniel. He asked about what came next. I answered all of them. Not because the conversation repaired everything. Not because 4 words and 22 minutes could cover 34 years of being the daughter whose ambitions were impractical, but because he asked, for the first time, in the right direction. And that was somewhere to start. 3 weeks after the wedding, Eleanor Marsh sent me a handwritten note. She sent handwritten notes for things that mattered. I had received 3 in 6 years, when I made partner, when I signed my first board member, and when the hospital system restructuring closed. This one was 4 sentences. Your wedding was one of the most elegant evenings I have attended in years. Your parents seemed surprised by you. Most parents of extraordinary people are. Keep building. I put the note in the drawer where I keep things that matter. Daniel's proposal napkin from the restaurant. A photograph of my team the day we moved into our first real office. A letter from my first client, handwritten on company letterhead, thanking me for saving something they had almost given up on. The note from Eleanor went in the same drawer. Not as proof. Not as evidence. Just as part of the record of a life that had been built quietly and completely by someone who had learned very early that the work was the only argument worth making. My name is Claire Donovan. I am 34 years old. My parents left my wedding at 9:47 p.m. They saw the guest list too late. My entire board was there. The people who had watched me build something from nothing were on the dance floor when my parents slipped out the side exit. I did not plan that moment. I simply invited everyone who mattered. For the first time in 34 years, they were all in the same room. And the room told a story my parents had spent 15 years not knowing existed. I built my firm without their belief. I built my marriage without their blueprint. I built a life so complete and so honest that when they finally walked into the middle of it, they did not recognize their own daughter. That is not revenge. That is just what happens when you stop waiting for permission and start building anyway. The work held. It always holds. If you do it honestly and you do it completely, and you do not stop because the people who were supposed to believe in you first decided not to, the work holds. And someday, not always but sometimes, the people who left early realize what they walked out on. My parents are still figuring out how to be proud of someone they never quite understood. I am still figuring out how much space to give them while they do. But I am figuring it out from the center of a life I built myself. And that is somewhere to stand. If you have ever built something the people closest to you did not believe in, leave one word in the comments.
Just one.
I read every single one. And if this story reminded you that the work is the only argument worth making, share it with someone who needs to hear that today.
Subscribe.
The next story is already waiting.